I'm Reverend Phil, and I'm your host for Words of the Prophets. Where are our prophets now? Where are those messages God chooses to communicate divine revelation through? In the past, the Creator has sent prophets like Abraham, Siddhartha, Jesus, Muhammad, and many more. Maybe our higher power has switched tactics since we reinterpret God's words as soon as the Creator's prophets leave us. Could it be that Spirit talks to each one of us individually and we haven't learned to listen? On Words of the Prophets, our modern prophets show us how to find the internal prophet that is the I Am, and we discuss the application of spiritual principles in all aspects of our lives. Love and light, everybody. I'm Reverend Phil, and I'm your host for Words of the Prophets. Sitting alongside me, well, actually the far end, is John Lennon, who is our co-host. Hi, John.
Hey, Phil. Nice to see you.
Glad to have you back here. And today our guests are from the Joan Duffy chapter of Veterans for Peace. So sitting to my immediate right is Daniel Craig, who is the president of that chapter. Hi, Dan.
Good afternoon.
And then between Dan and John is Ken Mayers, and he's also part of the chapter, and he's also a member of the National Board of Directors for Veterans of Peace. And we're going to be talking about peace. Today our prophetic topic is, neither shall they learn war anymore.
And this topic comes from the King James Version of the Old Testament in the book of the prophet Isaiah, in the 2nd chapter, verse 4. The verse reads as follows: "And he shall judge among the nations, and shall rebuke many people, and they shall beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war any more." Again, this is a quote from Isaiah. Early in Isaiah's writings, in the 2nd chapter, the 4th verse. Isaiah was one of those fellas who was pretty much just like any of us. He lived about 700 before Common Era. He was married, had a couple of sons, lived in the city of peace, Jerusalem. And he knew that Jerusalem was likely to be sacked yet again. The city of peace had come under several wars where people had invaded the city, disrupted its life, turned it upside down, and then Jerusalem would rebuild. And this happened back and forth through many of the conquerors. And Isaiah heard from God his own prophetic calling. And this book, Isaiah, is probably one of the most famous of the Old Testament prophets. And partly that is because of his eloquence, partly because of his diligence to being God's man, God's representative, God's prophet. And he made it very clear, war doesn't work anymore. They've tried. We've tried. Them versus us. It simply was a cycle that could not continue anymore. And so he delivered the word of the Lord and said, "Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore." Today we'll be talking about how some folks have taken this very seriously and have decided that the time of war is no longer relevant, is no longer the way. And so we discuss with our good friends from Veterans for Peace. I'm glad you guys are with us today. And let's talk a little bit about Veterans for Peace.
Go ahead.
history lesson?
Well, Veterans for Peace actually started in 1985 as a reaction to the Reagan policies in Central America. It was founded by a group of veterans in Maine. I was living in Vermont at the time, and the second year of its existence, 1986, the president of Veterans for Peace was a retired Marine Corps colonel. And I was at a conference with him from another peace group, and he looked at me and said, "You're a Marine, right?" I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "You will join Veterans for Peace and you will enjoy it." I said, "Yes, sir." So I've been a member ever since. And right from the start, Veterans for Peace started taking whatever actions it could, even as a small organization, to help change the Reagan policies in Central America. One of the first actions was a fast on the Capitol steps by 4 vets that went on until they were all on the verge of collapse. But that fast helped encourage a number of congresspersons to go to Central America and see for themselves what was going on. In fact, Charlie Clements, who lived in Santa Fe for 10 years and was a member of our chapter while I was here recently, did an event with us at the Unitarian Universalist congregation in Santa Fe, an anti-torture event. And Charlie, at the time that Veterans for Peace was founded, was working in Washington, D.C., and actually led and became a charter member of Veterans for Peace and led several of those original delegations to Central America that resulted in cutting off the funding for the Salvatorian death squads and the Contras, so that it had some significant impact in spite of its small size, and it grew steadily to the point we now have, there are roughly 110, 120 chapters around the country, in practically every state of the Union. There are 3 chapters in Santa Fe, in New Mexico, one in Santa Fe, one in Taos, and one in Albuquerque, and there are a couple of vets down in Las Cruces that are trying to get a chapter started. So after the Reagan years, things seemed to calm down a little bit, and membership somewhat stagnated, but George W. Bush came along, and while he was a disaster for the country, he was certainly great for Veterans for Peace. So that
backdoor success.
Yeah, so that our membership actually grew roughly tenfold during the George W. Bush years, and we now have approximately 8,000 members nationwide. So that's kind of the thumbnail history of Veterans for Peace as a whole.
And how about you? Why are you part of this? Somebody come up to you and said you're going to join?
No, actually, it was one of the few conscious decisions I made in my life. I think before the illegal invasion of Iraq, I think I joined in, I want to say October when I first met you guys, because you had been in existence for a few months when I first met Ken and everyone else. Ken was one of the founding members of the chapter here. What does it take, 9
It
vets?
takes 10 vets to
10
form
vets
a chapter.
to form a chapter, so they'd formed a chapter, and I had actually run into Kip Corneely at the Taylor Women United event, the Gathering for Mother Earth, and I walked around the table because I saw veterans and I saw For Peace, so I walked in the other direction. And then I ran into Kip again a few months later at the Dennis Kucinich event, and he came up to me. I couldn't get away from him, and asked me if I was interested in coming to a chapter meeting, and I joined shortly thereafter, went to the meeting, met a bunch of good people, and I think that was 2002, fall of 2002. But I joined because I found a group of people with a common cause. Walking around for quite a few years after the Gulf War '91, I was in the Gulf in '91. I was walking around quite pissed off, quite confused, quite angry, and didn't know what to do with all that. And then I met Veterans for Peace, and it gave me some direction as far as venting in a much healthier way than usually went on in my head. But it's been a good experience. We've been pretty active over the last few years. I think the last year and a half we've had a lull in activity, and I think that's happened nationwide amongst many groups working in activism. I'm not sure if it's burnout across the board or just, ebb and flow of the work, but we've managed to help raise awareness in Santa Fe to some degree or another.
I think it was, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I marched with you guys on the Roundhouse. Maybe it was a little bit longer than that. I'm spatially challenged. Do you catch a lot of flack from regular veterans groups? Are you able to work with them? Are they sympathetic? I mean, I guess I guess my question is, having experienced war, why there aren't more people that are with you and saying, wait a second, this is insane?
Well, it varies from location to location. There are actually a couple of places in the country, places you might expect, San Francisco, Santa Cruz, California, where Veterans for Peace has actually taken over the VFW post or the American Legion post in the city. Generally speaking, we don't get so much overt flack, but it's tough on a lot of vets who come back and they want to believe that their time in the service was a service to the country. They want to believe that America has always stood for good in the world, that we only send our service abroad to do good things. And so there's a lot of denial that goes on. Obviously, we have some very strong issues in common, certainly in terms of the equitable treatment of veterans, and particularly, I mean, with the war that's going on now, with a huge percentage of troops that are coming back either with PTSD or traumatic brain injury. That's something where VFP, American Legion, VFW, AMVETS are all on the same side of getting decent treatment for the returning vets. But for the traditional veterans organizations, it's kind of hard for them to turn around and become Veterans for Peace.
Is it somehow, I mean, you guys are warriors by definition of being in military service, and yet, that's a complicated word, warrior. And part of the complication, I'm sure, is kind of brought out when you are a veteran, a warrior for peace. And it seems to me that any of our folks sitting out there who have fought for this country, who have enlisted in the service, with that ideal of thinking that we are representing our country in the right for righteousness and that kind of thing, and then have discovered maybe that's not quite the full story anyway. And what do we do about that?
Well, the story starts out about right here, when men traditionally, and now women to such a great degree, are conditioned a certain way. Not to denigrate the human species, but we're not too different than dogs. We're easily conditioned.
And that's denigrating dogs.
It's really.
But yeah, good point. But the issue is that when one of us, and I'll just speak for myself, when I hit 16 and 17, I was already conditioned to, this is what you do. I had a family history of service. I was brought up being told the story about God and country. To my dismay, and what happened to be a rude awakening for me decade plus later, is that my military service was not about, God's a whole separate issue for me around politics and religion. But around country, it wasn't about country. It was about government. It was about corporate America. And we as soldiers being used by our government in cahoots, whatever that word actually means, with corporate America to further our vital economic interest. I remember growing up hearing that word, those words, vital economic interest. Those three words together in democracy don't necessarily go hand in hand. What's good for business is good for the country. I think that's a quote from decades back.
That might even be Henry Ford or something like that.
It was Charles Wilson, president of General Motors. What's good for General Motors is good for the USA.
Right.
And then he became Secretary of Defense.
Well,
which is a misnomer. It's the War Department still. But that was the issue that I was brought up being told a story about. Here's what you do. Here's what we're all about, that bright, shining city on the hill. And there are aspects of that about our country, but there's a whole other story in the shadow that is not talked about. And I think, as far as your question about vet groups, I think my personal experience having some interaction with them is not that we're, like you said, we're not overtly put down or demeaned or anything like that. We're just sort of ignored. We're like over here, which is unfortunate in some respects because we do have that common cause with AMVETS, VFW, on and on. When vets come back, and vets have always come back and been treated poorly. Going back to the Revolutionary War, vets have come back serving their country and been treated horribly. Being ignored might even be preferable to some of the treatment vets have been handed out over the last 200 plus years.
And of course, the one shining exception to that was World War II, which led to the creation of the GI Bill, which to a large extent created the American middle class. And huge investment in returning vets after World War II. But it really does shine because of its exceptions. You probably know after World War I, vets were guaranteed a pension, which was actually supposed to be paid out in 1945 when they'd be reaching retirement age. And because of the Great Depression, there are all these destitute vets that marched on Washington and were driven off the National Mall by Doug MacArthur's troops, his aide being Dwight D. Eisenhower. And they were literally driven off, gassed, gunfire, and so forth, and peaceful demonstrations. But that was more typical of the way vets were treated in our history than the World War II. And after Korea, there was a lot of stigma attached to vets because the mythology was, this is the first war we haven't won. That Korea ended in a stalemate. And of course, the Vietnam vets got treated even worse in general. So that at least what I've seen so far is that the American people aren't blaming the returning vets from Iraq and Afghanistan for what's gone on the way they did after Vietnam. But treatment of vets, as Daniel has said, has been, with one exception, uniformly poor in a scenario where all vets do share something in common. But as he says, the mainstream vets organizations, my limited observation is that they like to get together to celebrate their bonds of having been vets of the same war, but not really get into an analysis of why they did what they did and at whose behest they did what they did. They just want to avoid that.
No.
Let me ask you a question for a second. Just what you were saying. Do you think the majority, or what percentages do you think of Veterans for Peace, for instance, are there because they have seen the history of the futility of war, and how many are there because they just experienced the carnage and said, I don't care if we win or lose, this is not okay?
Well, my experience, and I've been to a lot of our national conventions, which is where you get to see what's going on outside of Santa Fe. And in general, at least the ones who come to the national conventions, have probably started more often than not because of what they've seen in their personal experience, but usually that's prompted them to start asking the questions why and digging it into it. And so, for example, I think you would find that most Veterans for Peace have probably read stuff by Chomsky, for example, and certainly read stuff by Howard Zinn, who is a member of Veterans for Peace, and probably read stuff by Daniel Ellsberg, who is a member of Veterans for Peace. Certainly in much greater proportions than you would find the case in average Americans, let alone members of VFW or VFP. So it's a combination. And for some people, it was a road to Damascus type of experience where there's just some event that completely changes their understanding of the world. And then for others of us, it's a slow process of gradual education that leads to conviction.
The comment you made earlier about denial, used the word denial, is like, I don't think any human being wants to believe that their whatever their endeavor in life is, was of no worth or of question. And I think given veterans' experience, maybe more so those who've been in wartime than in peace, no one wants to believe that their service was in vain.
What if
But
this
it's
service is
important-
meant to teach us that we shouldn't be of service?
That we shouldn't be of
Yeah,
service?
I mean that this is futile. I mean that.
Well, in that respect,
I mean, let
can
me.
see it.
Maybe it's not a good analogy. I've got a defense system in my body. It acts up when I do something stupid, whatever that stupid may be. I'm allergic to certain kind of nuts. If I eat the wrong nut, I'm going to feel it, and my body's going to react to it. At some point, as an individual, I come to that realization, hopefully early on, I can't eat this. I can't keep doing this to myself. My body is trying to teach me something. So I'm saying, why isn't that lesson, if I see a collective consciousness, maybe that's part of the problem. Maybe people don't see that collective consciousness.
the collective consciousness can be manipulated.
But from the inside, if you guys are the white blood cells, you're seeing this. Wait a second, man, this body is, we can't hold up to this.
Right.
Well, that's an interesting part of the analogy because, of course, we try to recruit new members. And to a certain extent, what we're trying to do is raise the white blood count. You know, and if you go back, we founded the chapter in July of 2002. And we decided our first event would be on Veterans Day of 2002. When we went into that event on Veterans Day 2002, I think we had 15 members. When we left the event, we had 50 members. And what we saw as our primary mission at that point was raising public awareness of the cost of the Iraq folly. And at that point, only 30% of the American public thought that going into Iraq was wrong. 5 years later, 70% of the American public. So I think that in that sense, the white blood count worked at the public level, at least at the awareness level. And then the question is, okay, how do you get those white blood corpuscles to start attacking the contaminants?
Right.
And that takes political action, and it's a lot easier to raise awareness than it is to get people off their butts to do something about it. But then we had an election, 2006. Most people thought, gee, look, we've changed our Congress. We're going to get a change in our policies. Well, it didn't work that way. Then we got an election to, just elected a new president who's going to change everything. We're not seeing much of the change. And so we've got to start raising that white blood count all over again. People have got to realize that unless they demand change, the change isn't going to happen.
And the analogy, the two words that come up are defense, well, Department of Defense and War Department. Your immune system doesn't go out there and destroy those nuts that it's allergic to. It defends when you do the dumb move.
Yeah.
The George Bush Rumsfeld, Ashcroft, Rice type people of the world, they're out there stepping on nuts left and right, so to speak.
So to speak.
And literally, I mean, and not, it is what it is. This whole issue of torture, that is an issue. What is done to the human body, spirit, mind, in the name of this word defense is ludicrous. And it's more than ludicrous. I mean, it's criminal. That's one of the issues that we've been working on that came up very recently, was the Torture Awareness Month, along with some other groups here in Santa Fe, is just raising awareness that what is going on is torture. It's not enhanced anything, it's torture. But getting, I work in treatment, in addiction counseling, and in Alcoholics Anonymous, there's this saying, faith without works is dead. Raising the consciousness and the awareness is great. Now, what footwork follows that? And I think that's been one of our big challenges, is raising awareness and now footwork on a larger scale.
One of the things that was existent in Isaiah's time, in the prophet's time, is also existent now and has always been part of the human family, so to speak. And that there are those who have a vested interest in making sure we do not wake up. We hear, excuse me, one of the greatest books in the Bible, Isaiah, is all about, look out, folks, this doesn't work anymore, and you're just getting clobbered, and I don't want that, saith the Lord. And I'm doing everything possible to work with you in this. I mean, it's a big part of the canon, the Holy Scripture. But
The species apparently is on the slow reading group.
Well, I think
we need to put in more pictures, I think.
I think that brings up a good
That's
point.
a good book.
That's right.
You know, I think part of it is the bankruptcy of any credibility that most of the major religions have. I mean, there isn't a religion that teaches war. They'll speak out against it. Your leaders will go to church every Sunday and then go home and go push a button and kill, 100,000 people or something. I mean, it's just, I think we have a much deeper systemic problem than just, where we've been getting this message, we still haven't gotten it.
So far, fear and the manipulation of fear trumps everything. And
fear is the absence of faith in God, in any belief structure that we are one.
That gets in the way of profit.
That's Profit.
Yes. Yeah, good point. It gets in the way of... I read an interesting book years ago that sort of got me to the point where when I met the Veterans for Peace group, there was some denial, more ignorance on my part than denial, but it talked about the givers and the takers. And some of the translation is the have and the have-nots. It benefits the haves to keep the people ignorant. Then I can just send you to the Middle East, Southwest Asia, South America, Central America, Africa, get you to do what I need you to do for my profit. I don't want you educated. I don't want you informed. I don't want you awake. And so that's why I'm saying the process starts here, Because if you get them here by the time a man or woman is 17, they're hard-pressed to change the conditioning. It takes conscious effort to undo what's been done. If we were this Spartan nation of warriors, there would not be, this is my opinion versus statistics or research, people could go off and kill 80-year-old men and women, 12-year-old boys, 4-year-old boys, and not think anything of it, because that warrior, they're the enemy to be dealt with the way we dealt with them. We're not like that. And the human being is, most human beings are not like that. The psychopaths, the sociopaths lack those mechanisms. They're like that. But the average person goes and does that, comes back traumatized. That doesn't speak of us as being this big machismo warrior society that is pushed from here.
yeah. In fact, and there's a superb book by Army Lieutenant Colonel David Grossman called On Killing, which is it's a remarkable book. And basically, the message is it's very, very difficult to get people to kill other people. And it started, the research on this issue started back in World War II when S.L.A. Marshall went on several of the invasions. I think he went on Normandy. I know he went on several of the Pacific invasions to observe how many troops in battle actually aimed at an enemy and fired at an enemy. And he found that only about 25% ever pulled the trigger. And that lots of those who pulled the trigger were firing high, so forth, he says, because they just really didn't want to have on themselves killing someone. So after these studies, the Army realized they had a serious problem, because clearly they wanted, that is, the people who make policy say, we've got to get our soldiers to be more willing to kill. And so they started revamping. There were two aspects of what they did. One was to really systematize the demonization of the enemy. And to do it with training, to do it with cartoons, to do it in all kinds of ways. These are subhumans we're killing. I mean, whether it's those murderous bastards, the Nazis, but even more so the Japs. And the cartoons of the Japs were just vicious. So they started doing it with that. And by the time they got to Korea, they'd increased the firing rate to about 40%. By the time they got to Vietnam, killing Viet Cong, they'd gotten the firing rate up to 75%. And they believe now in killing towel heads in the Middle East, they can get it up to 90%. But the other part of the training that they did, besides the demonization of the enemy, was to change the relationship with the weapon. When I went through boot camp in the Marine Corps, we went out to the rifle range and we fired at a bullseye at 200 yards, 300 yards, and 500 yards. Now the way they train with the weapons, they put you in a fighting hole and there are electronic pop-up targets all around you. And the pop-up targets fly up and you develop the simple reflex to shoot at a pop-up target. And that pop-up target may turn out in real life to be a 4-year-old kid, but the reflex is going to be there.
And the issue around that is you get instant feedback.
Yeah.
You hit the target, it drops. So you get desensitized. You're not looking at a 4-year-old, 80-year-old, 50-year-old. You're looking at a target. You shoot, it drops, you get a badge.
And now what terrifies Grossman and terrifies me is that Grossman points out that the same things that the military service did to increase the kill rate is the ingredient of most of the video games that are on the market today. But in the military service, at least, there's some constraint in that you're saying, you will do this with an enemy that we identify. And with the video games, particularly teenage boys, are growing up getting the same kind of reflex training and desensitization to the human being without any constraints at all. I mean, whether it's, what's this,
Grand Theft
Auto or whatever it is, it's, hey, blow them away. Blow them away is the name of the game. And so this is really terrifying and something that Veterans for Peace is very concerned about.
Sort of a planned sociopathology.
Yeah,
And
a contagion of sociopaths.
The younger you can start someone off on that path, and then you get them corralled by basic training and military service, you've got all that training that, one, you didn't have to pay for, and you've already got them conditioned to look at the world in a certain way, as us against them, we're good, they're bad. Anything we do can be justified, and it's easy to do because you've been practicing for years.
An irony, and it's hard to say whether it's hopeful or not, is that they're finding that in spite of all this, and kids growing up with this, take these pilots in Nevada who are flying these drones 8,000 miles away, and they're starting to have manifestations of PTSD. from what they're doing, in spite of how detached they've become from the killing. So there's something really deep within us that that hears Isaiah's message. We act in contravention of it all the time, and we pay the price that you pay for eating nuts you're not supposed to eat. I mean, that it goes on within us.
So if part of the problem is the programming and training of little children, is Veterans of Peace doing any counter-programming?
We have a program, we don't call it counter-recruitment, it's more unique, and I think it's more appropriate. It's called full disclosure. And we have a new court, well, he's not so new, he's been doing it, Nathaniel, 3 years?
Yeah.
About 2.5, 3 years. We make contacts with the different schools, and we've been in talking to 8th grade through a couple classes here at the community college in Santa Fe, talking about our personal experiences in the military, the process that we've just sort of been talking about here, how you're asked to go do something, and lots of times through ignorance you go out there and do it, not knowing the ramifications. So we go and talk to kids, Los Alamos, Peñasco, Española here in town. There's a group in Albuquerque doing the same basic thing, going in, talking to kids about what does this mean when you sign up for the military. They throw you the perks, travel, fun travel adventure. They don't talk about what happens when you see your best friend blown apart. What happens when you kill that 4-year-old or that 70-year-old woman? How do you deal with that? That is not a selling point. You don't sell someone a Porsche and tell them about the cost of insurance or the money you're spending on fuel. You do the highlights. So we sort of try and bring it into balance, what's being put out by the recruiters. Our goal isn't to make people not join. Our goal is to inform people so that they make an informed decision on their own to the best of their
Do
ability.
you get
Going
into
earlier-
grade schools and such, or
Trade schools?
grade?
Grade schools. A friend of mine asked me a few years ago to talk to her 6th graders, but that was before we had full disclosure going. She's a teacher at wherever she used to be a teacher, 6th grade. And the topic came up around history stuff, and she asked me if I'd go in there and talk to them. But as an organized group, I think the youngest we've been in is with 7th and 8th graders. Probably.
Yeah, there's it varies from location to location what chapters are doing to try to counter some of the influences of this early programming. So, for example, there are a number of chapters which are really focused on getting JROTC out of the schools. Of course, now military claims that JROTC is not a recruiting mechanism, it's not a vehicle for indoctrination and so forth. And I'll admit, getting JROTC out of schools isn't one of my personal top priorities, but in some chapters that's been very strong. There are some chapters which get involved in trying to reduce the visibility and dominance of war toys in the malls and so forth. One particularly interesting one, though, in Philadelphia was a test site for a multi-million-dollar Army installation called the Army Experience, where in a mall where people can go in and they can sit in one of these battle simulators that the Army has and blow people away and all this sort of stuff. And they organized pickets at the mall, and the Army was forced. It was something like a $6.5 million installation, and the Army ultimately pulled it out because they got so much resistance.
Clearly, you guys have to come up with a video game called Plowshares and Pruning Hooks or something.
Well, that's one of the issues, is that the human psyche is drawn towards action and adventure. There's a part of our brain you don't mess with tens of thousands and tens of thousands of years of evolution. Our brain has adapted towards stimulus, towards action, excitement, even drama. And that's that conditioning process. How do you channel that into what you want your society to move towards? This place has been moving towards this place has been militaristic since day one. It's not like this is new and fresh on the scene. It's been going on centuries, millennium. It's a human condition, not just specific to our country. This is where we live, though, so this is where we get to do the work.
Interesting. You used the earlier phrase "city on the hill," which is from when the Pilgrims were coming over from having escaped England, gone to Leiden in Holland, and then sailed over to this country for freedom of conscience.
Something they wanted for themselves, incidentally, but
Well,
weren't eager to
exactly.
grant
The
to
city
others.
on the hill was twofold. It was one, to inspire more people to come, and it was also as a warning flare to the native folks who lived here, who were, being ousted. So it was, it is somehow always in our psyche. And I think about Goethe's play, Faust, just sign on the line here. Everything you want, you can have. And at some point in time, it just seems like we have to grow up. And this growing, this maturing process means learning the difference between nationalism and freedom and persecution, corporate, all these different things.
We use the word democracy. Well, let me exclude myself from that. The word democracy is used when what is meant is capitalism. I forgot the author of a number of books. He spoke at Pioneers a few years ago, talked about semantics. You just keep trading words. And finally, this word is taken to mean this word. So we talk about democracy, freedom, so on and so forth, but we're talking about an economic system. That's what I think fundamentally is going on. Again, this is opinion versus research or anything like that. We're looking at a capitalist system that is striving to maintain the status quo for X amount of the populace at the expense of the rest of the world, not just the rest of that populace of that country, but everything in existence is out there to be exploited and used for the benefit of a small select few.
So what we're really looking at is parts are greater than the whole. If we see the whole as
Some
being-
men are more equal than others.
that could be a whole show in itself. I mean, this to me is about spirit. And again, I go back to the basic religions and I drop all of this on their doorstep because there isn't a religion that doesn't teach us we are all one. But, the same religions will go and not stand up against, the war or any war, will support wars, will twist the religion around to call people to war. So we're getting the message that the whole doesn't matter.
God and country when necessary.
I don't know about that.
Well, I mean, I know what you're saying, but
Yeah.
when
It's getting good now.
when needed, we invoke the name of God, whatever you call God, whatever it may be to a person.
Which crazy pope was it in the Crusades that said, in the name of Jesus, go kill the Muslims? I mean, where did Jesus ever say anything about killing anybody? I mean, so we got these. I mean, I think it's really the concept that people who strive for power should be denied it because the mere fact that they're striving for it shows they're unbalanced. That if I run for president, I should immediately be disqualified because I got to be sick to run for president. I mean, to me, there's just the mechanism. I mean, that's why I asked John to open up with talking about Isaiah. And it didn't start with Isaiah 2,700 years ago. This has been around for thousands upon thousands of years.
There is a difference. In Isaiah's time, the most powerful rulers with the most powerful army in the world were limited in just how much destruction they could wreak on the planet. We are no longer limited. I mean, and it's not just the military. I mean, there are at least 5 different ways, taking a number off the top of my head, there are at least 5 different ways that we can destroy at least all human life on the planet. We may not get rid of the cockroaches, but whether we go to war or not, you know, so that we really have to completely reconsider what it means to be stewards of the earth, so to speak. And certainly doing away with war is an awfully important part of that, because the power of our destructive weapons is so intense that can be a fast way of doing it. But just the continued reckless consumption of resources and the reckless poisoning of the atmosphere without, you know, if we ended war tomorrow and without changing these other aspects of our personality, it'd just change the date at which the species becomes extinct, you know, through global warming or other pollutants and so forth. So we're at a stage in history where anybody who's willing to look at what's happening in the world and to break away from the bread and circuses has got to understand that we obviously all need to change. And the difficulty there, of course, is what Manker Olson, an economist back in the 60s, referred to as the free rider program. That is, it's not going to do any good if I change my ways unless everybody else changes their ways.
Therefore.
And if everybody else changes their ways, it won't make any difference if I don't change my way.
It's a good argument.
So I'd be a fool to give up what I'm doing, because unless everybody else does it, you know, we're doomed anyway.
And I work in addictions. Excuse me.
Go ahead.
I work in addiction counseling, and one of the things over the years that I'm keenly aware of is that you don't stop the drug use and call that recovery. Recovery means changing every aspect of who one is, and fundamentally that's a spiritual issue. Our approach, my approach, is it's a spiritual issue, not that it's not anything else, but that's sort of the foundation. It's a disease of a spiritual nature manifesting in many different ways, right? So if someone gets clean and they don't change all these other things, then go back to using. You don't change the system, so to speak. The system in place supports active addiction. And we're not so different as a country in a way. I always look at us as a country, in a way, as a system, as an addict. The drug of choice is more. Yours, what's mine is mine, what's yours is mine. And that's the way we conduct ourselves to too great a degree, and you want to keep that system going. You keep the people ignorant, you keep them scrambling, you keep them scrapping for daily bread, and they don't have time to question anything except, I got to be up tomorrow morning at 4 o'clock for my second
It seems
job.
that you are applying one of the 12 steps is to take a serious moral inventory.
Right.
You know, at what's going on, which is a serious examination of character defects, about, you know, what is standing in the way between serenity and me.
Right.
What's
And
standing in the way is a lack of spirit. Morals don't come from my best thinking. Morals comes from my best prayer.
and that's why the first step is to allow God in, right?
You got to
No.
create an opening.
You got to
somewhere.
create the opening.
The
and
thing about that
Our job
inventory
is
is
to let
that
God out.
I think with and I'm taking a chance on speaking on behalf of many people because I really hate to do that. But I think one of the things that many of us in Veterans for Peace came to is a place where we had to do an inventory of, like, what the hell did I just do? Even if that what did I just do was 30 and 40 years ago or weeks ago. And it's just that inventory is like, what I did was not okay. The story is not okay. And we're talking about an entire society's foundation. The story is not okay. But I was told it was. I did what I did, and I find out in retrospect, with the trauma attached, that what I did was not okay, and it was for a lie. And I'm, again, taking some leeway here, speaking on other people's behalfs, but I just look at it more fundamentally or more basic as that inventory. It's like, things are not okay here. What's going on? What do I need to change? Then how do I change it? And I think that's a common story for VFP type people.
And certainly the along the way, from that spiritual basis that Phil is talking about, we have to seek amends, you know, with those against whom we have created harm. And I'm interested that your organization is not Veterans Against War.
That's right.
Or Veterans Against Destruction. It's Veterans for Peace.
That's right, and that's an important distinction which frequently gets lost. And in our different chapters address that different ways. But for example, in our chapter, we've done a number of things which are in recognition of the fact that peace begins at home. So that, for example, right now we have sent out a survey to the membership to see how many members would be willing to participate in Habitat for Humanity teams to build some habitat here in Santa Fe. A few years ago, we bought the house for a play at El Museo Cultural and invited all members of the community to come to see this play free. And when they came, they either should bring some food for one of the food banks, or they could make a contribution to one of 11 different local service groups. So that we recognize that if we're going to be for peace, it's not just a matter of opposing the war policies, but we also recognize that in terms of where do we have the most leverage speaking as veterans, it's generally with respect to American foreign policy. And that's the reason we're working there. I mean, universal health care is probably just as important, but that's not where we have our leverage. You know, we have our leverage in issues of foreign policy and things like our torture policies and so forth. So we're particularly visible and outspoken in those areas. But ending war is not the same thing as achieving peace. And achieving peace is going to require all the rest of those things, recognition of how we extract our resources from the earth in a responsible way. Sustainability is kind of, I think, the first prerequisite of peace is we act in ways that are sustainable. War is clearly not sustainable, but for that matter, either is coal-fired, continued production of coal-fired power plants is sustainable. So all those things have to be addressed.
I need to cut in here. We're going to be running out of time. We end with John. We start the ending with John giving us a summary. I think we don't have as much time for today's summaries we had for most times, but John, take it away.
Well, we've only been talking for 10 minutes. Let's summarize. Veterans for Peace has joined Phil and me today, and we've joined them in a recognition and understanding that the way we've been doing things from a certain nationalistic version of patriotism is destructive for many people and it's simply not working. And beneath that simply not working are layers upon layers of difficulties for veterans returning from service, for people waking up 30 weeks, 30 months, 30 years after being actively engaged with the enemy and going through great distress, post-traumatic stress. The spiritual basis for health and well-being for individuals and for us as the body politic must come forth again. We must see whose we are. We belong to each other. We must make for the things that work for peace. And we must do this not someday off, but now. And I hope that you've been inspired by the complexity of this issue, because that means there are many places where we can actually wake up, take stock, and get involved. And I'm sure that you guys are looking for more white corpuscles out there ready to help make the body healthy.
Okay, before we wrap this up, you guys want to give out some contact information?
Well, you can find us on the web at www.vfp-santafe.org for our local chapter, and the national website is www.veteransforpeace, all spelled out, all run together.
And
.org.
can somebody get involved and not be a veteran?
Yes. We have associate members, non-veterans, who support the work we do, and not only do they support the work we do, they do the work to a great degree.
Okay. One more time, give them the contact.
Local one, www.VFP, as in Veterans for Peace, VFP-santafe.org. Nationally, it's www.veteransforpeace.org.
Guys, we thank you. Quickly, John and I, if you want to contact either one of us, you'll see trailing information at the end of the show with contact information. Feel free to contact us if you want questions or you think one of us can help you. We're both counselors, so feel free to do that. Next week, we're going to have a very interesting show on death and dying, so tune in next week. And I want to end this with, one of my favorite quotes. We stuck it into our promo. You may see that on the TV. It's a Sri Chinmoy quote, and it says, "Peace does not mean the absence of war. Peace means the presence of harmony, love, satisfaction, and oneness." And if I ever heard anything brilliant, it was that. So, you know what you need to do. Your voice needs to be out there. You need to speak up, whether it's in church, whether it's with your local politicians, whether it's out on the street, join a demonstration. These guys are out there working hard for you. Get involved, be involved, and maybe, just maybe, we won't need another Isaiah to come along and tell us how we're messing things up. So, until next week, you are God. God's in you. Let God out. Demonstrate it. Peace is not the absence of war. Presence of harmony, love, satisfaction, and oneness. Only you can do that. Nobody's going to do it for you. God's not going to do it for you. Get out there and do it. Thank you for listening to us. I hope you got moved to get involved. Until next week, blessings. I'm Reverend Phil, and I've been your host for Words of the Prophets. Thank you for tuning in. Please join me again next week, same time, same channel, for more Words of the Prophets.